Hey guys, this is Danny, also known as iAnnihilate, and I'm going to be looking at the 7.31D patch. Just briefly go over my initial thoughts and kind of first impressions without having played any games yet, and we'll see, what I get wrong, what I get right, and it's like a point D patch, so it's not too big, but there are some pretty big changes in my mind, at least for competitive play. Like right off the bat, added Marcy to Captain's mode. Not sure what people generally think of Marcy. I think she sometimes feels really strong, at least in pubs, because she can snowball lanes with a really good initiation. But she also, like having played it a few times myself, falls off pretty hard later on. So I don't know. I don't know what people think. I think the hero is pretty good, but I think people definitely need to test it quite a bit, especially in scrims and stuff, in an actual competitive environment. Probably see a lot of it in my pubs. Roshan being buffed to counter the Rasta cheese, Shadow Shaman cheese, where people have been doing Rosh with his ulti really early. That's a pretty good change. Attacks destroying wards and stuff is pretty interesting. The Satyr Mindstealer, not a big deal. And then already we have some pretty big changes here. The HP region on Bracer is probably not a big deal, but the Null Talisman change is definitely huge. It's a big nerf to Storm in particular. And honestly, the 3% maximum mana, like I think the only hero that would really do anything for is OD, unless I'm forgetting about something. Doesn't really feel particularly great, and I don't think the mana region increase is a good enough offset. I think people will go back to building Magic Wand a lot more, maybe one in lane. Maybe they'll even opt for like a Wraithband on or Bracer on some heroes instead. Uh, Probably even just getting a raindrop and skipping this type of item would be my guess. Like it doesn't feel great to me. I see carries last patch got Bassy Ring a decent amount. Maybe some mids will try and do that for some mana regen. Yeah, it just doesn't look like it would feel great to have in your inventory, even if it doubled at 25 minutes. Like I can see one being okay, but pretty sizable change to heroes that were building multiple of them. So like Storm, some people are doing it on Lena, Puck, for example, as well, since they like to skip treads early for travels later, and the early stats like help them a lot on an item like that. As far as like other heroes I would play, like Storm or Lena, I'm gonna go back to building Soul Ring a lot more often just for mana. And yeah, it's definitely like a pretty big change for a lot of int mids. I think Void Spirit's probably the least effective of the int mids because they didn't really do much for him anyway. You'd much rather rush like, I've seen tops and rush treads, or like people go Witchblade early, or even getting a fast Yules in some cases. It's not like a hero that really thrived on having too much additional mana either. Healing Salve half duration on allies is a huge change. I think that side lanes in particular have been way too snowbally in recent years, and a lot of it has just been people slowly getting better and better at using individual couriers. Like before, when we had the side shop and no individual couriers, it was really hard to like oftentimes the like meta strat was just you go die so that you can buy more items and come back to lane because the mid needed the courier. And like sometimes people still do that. That's type of strategy has been nerfed a couple times too. Like you have to go all the way to the tier 2. You can't die to neutrals. You still get the TP for respawning, but not for neutrals, I think. And the having them for like putting it on your carrier offlane makes a pretty big deal. I'm not sure because I'm not like I'm a mid player, so I'm not sure who would benefit more, like offlaners with this or carries. I think my like gut instinct tells me that like offlaners care way less about being healing salved. A lot of them are much stronger laners. Like a Necro probably doesn't care about being healing salved. Um, Legion probably doesn't care too much, even though it's not too popular right now. What else is there? Mars might care a little bit, but they build like bracers and definitely not a timber saw, but all the carries with high armor and low HP pools loved healing salves like Terror Blade. Uh, Not so much CK either, but I think he got a few nerfs, which we'll see. I don't remember. At least I hope he did. What other carries? Jug wouldn't care so much. Bloodseeker wouldn't care so much. Now starting to get picked. Neither would Monkey King, and I think like people are tending towards those type of heroes more often, at least OG did at the major, where they had like really strong laners for their carry, since the off lane was already kind of strong to begin with. But yeah, I mean it's a big change. We'll see how people adapt to it. It definitely hurts those like early game farming heroes like Luna, Medusa, and Terrorblade the most, I think. BKB nerf, I think it's pretty reasonable. I'm not sure if the cooldown was the only thing I would nerf. I think even putting it back down to 5 seconds would have been kind of nice. But still probably going to be bought like literally every game the way the meta is, unless it drastically changes from these like this small little D patch. Butterfly change honestly doesn't really matter that much. I feel like this item is still quite weak. When it had Flutter, it was very strong. And I think every other big ticket item for carries has gotten buffed over time. Like even Heart is pretty good. They get like the passive regen without being broken all the time. Scotty has like healing reduction. Um, Satanic has the dispel. Like there's all these other big like Silver Edge is like an active version of crit. Like there's all these other like non just stat stick items, and MKB is like still kind of strong as a counter to Butterfly as well. That just doesn't make it seem that viable usually. But I think it'll probably stay the same. Where like games where it is good, it'll be good. Like if they have a Ursa on the other team or an OD, like heroes that don't build MKB at all, then and rely on right clicks for their damage. Like Ursa can, but he'd really rather not to. He needs like Blink, BKB, Abyssal Blade, so, like Diffusal is usually in his inventory, or Battle Fury or something. They want Satanic. They want items to like get in and out of the fight a lot more often. They don't want something that just helps them hit somebody with evasion. Crimson Guard. I'm not sure. I think Visage has been quite popular, but I think Crimson Guard is just still too bad of an item to build, even against those type of heroes. And it just doesn't feel like it does as much as something like a Wraith Pact, unless that's been significantly changed. We'll get to that soon. Normally, like with team items, there's like you're building it on your utility offlaner or sometimes the 4. And if you're really lucky, you can build it on the 5. Like I've seen some 5s get to a Wraith Pact on Pugna if they're having a really good game. Or the drum boots eventually on something like a CM5, but these like team fight aura items are really strong and powerful because they affect the whole team. So like if you have like one team with Crimson Guard, Wraith Pact, Pipe, Guardian Greaves will be really strong, but you have to like put that like you're taking gold away from other people all the time. There's only so many resources you can divvy up, and by like 20 to 30 minutes, you can really only choose 1 or 2 of them on your like utility slot. So like for a while it was Pipe that got nerfed like 10 times in a row. Then it turned into, I think Guardian Greaves got a little popular, but not that much. There were some like Holy Locket shenanigans going on. Wisp has always been strong with like Mech Holy Lockets. Even like the utility item, which isn't really an aura before Wraith Pact, was just people built Vessel more often as the offlaner, as sort of their utility stick. Hood got bought as a standalone a lot, but Wraith Pact has just been like the be all end all item the past like patch, which was pretty long time now. It's just too much value. You get like the Vlad's aura and the other aura on top of it. It's just way too strong. Crimson Guard's just not even close. Lincoln's is whatever. The stats are still strong on it. I think that the passive components, like outside of the like, I guess it's not really an active on Lincoln's, but like the blocking a spell part of Lincoln's, it's not like it's obviously why you buy the item versus other stat items, but the like the part of Lincoln's that feels good when you play like a Morphling or something is you get all this extra mana regen and stats to play with, and then it also gives you that like super nice layer protection in something like a Doom. And like if your cooldown's 12 versus 14, or even like against Doom's case, if it was literally a 20-second cooldown on your Lincoln Sphere, you're still blocking the Doom. It's more so like you're paying a slot tax for having the Lincoln's effect in your inventory. So honestly, like bigger nerfs to it would have been to the stats or the regen components on it, or the price, because it's very expensive generally to build early. It's like basically like you can buy a Battle Fury on a hero like PA, or you're playing Morphling, you're spending the same amount of gold on the Lincolns, and like they don't have the same effect towards like farming faster. It's definitely just more of a survivability thing, if that makes sense. Satanic, I think the same thing. Like the active is obviously important, but the lifesteal is so much that this isn't that big of a reduction. And honestly, like the only times I feel like the Satanic doesn't heal me enough is if they have Scotty or something, or like there's Shiva's aura, the vessels. The dispel effect is the more important part of Satanic these days from the active, if anything, just to get like a bunch of negative debuffs off you. You're playing against Ember Spirit Roots, or just a bunch of slows, or a blind from like a Coddle or something. Like that kind of utility is more useful, and obviously the stats on it are nice too. Eternal Shroud is really only an item I think I saw people pick up sometimes on Leshrac. I haven't really seen it outside of that, and I don't think these changes are enough to make it that much more viable, especially with the Bloodstone buffs, because Leshrac basically never buys Eternal Shroud with the new Bloodstone. If they want something that gives them that kind of effect, they just go for Bloodstone for like the spell lifesteal and extra mana in the fights. The Brooch changes are interesting. I think the item itself is strong, but it suffers from some of those elements I talked about with Lincoln's earlier, where it's so expensive. Like the Witchblade is so cheap, and that's like the majority of the good part of the item, I think, is just literally the Witchblade. And you have to pay like 3 times as much to complete it into this item that honestly, when it's good, like if you're like Pugno is picked a lot, when your main target's someone with Decrep and you don't want to buy Nullifier, like if the Ghost Shroud or Ghost Scepters or whatever are like the main problem you're dealing with, it solves it late game and it has its like usefulness. But outside of that, it's just way too expensive for the mediocre active until like your very last item, and then it's like I think it's even too strong in some cases. Like you could play even like a Sven or something, and this could be your 6th item against a Terrorblade. You'll 5-shot him, like you'll kill him in a stun. Like ignoring all of their armor late game is so huge. You basically give yourself like the Elder Titan aura against those type of heroes, which is extremely powerful. Even if they have like bonus armor, like it would go through. It's even more powerful than that. It's just the downside is like you're just never gonna really buy this item. It's too expensive. You're thinking like, oh, the guy's just decrepting or ghost sceptering himself. You could buy a sheep for like 1,000 more gold, or finish your Witchblade into a Revenant's Brooch. It's not like it's not this very like difficult decision for you to make. Honestly, a lot of the time, it's just like a 7th item usually or 6th item. Then I think the Wraith Pack should have been nerfed even more. I'm not sure what they could do to nerf it more, but I don't think the model size will matter too much. Maybe it will. And I'm not sure if the attacks that destroy... 5 is obviously too much, and 3 is too little, but 4 also feels like too much as well, just like a general first impression. Obviously need to like play against it more. The main reason I'm against certain things, like even like Pugna Ward being so strong right now, or Wraith Fact, is it really punishes melee heroes for no reason. Like if your team just has, it's like kind of like Phoenix Egg like level of importance. Like this thing actually needs to die in team fights, or people are just gonna do 0 damage. And like you don't really want to base, like if you have like a bunch of melee, like even like an Earthshaker suffers a lot from Wraith Pact being so strong, because you'd rather just have somebody who can maybe like a Snapfire or something who hit the Wraith Pact later, because everyone buys this item every game, and like it just kind of limits the possibilities of your draft since it's literally an every game item. If they made the aura less strong from the ward, or maybe even I don't know what they could change, but if they made the actual effect of it less powerful and less auto include in every game of Dota ever, then you wouldn't really have to think of other things. Like basing your draft around certain items is very toxic. I think BKB is the one exception that like even then it's kind of solvable through items. Like if someone buys a BKB, you can be like, oh, I'm gonna buy Hex later and kill him before BKB. But there's no like item that counters Wraith Pact besides Wraith Pact. So I feel like it's just a badly designed item from my perspective. And then on to hero changes. I think these changes don't matter for Alchemist. Hero's still not that good. I think Bristle changes are weird. It's one of those heroes that's either too strong or useless. Like there's a lot of like OD is classically that hero class as well. And they're not very fun to play against either, so I'm all for them not being too strong. I don't think these changes matter too much. I don't even know how the cast range is affected by the Aghanims, because that's the only reason you'd pick Bristleback, is his Aghanims is so strong. Hoof Stomp buff is really nice, because people like to max Double Edge first, or even Return sometimes, I think. I don't know, I haven't seen Centaur in a while, I haven't played it myself, but putting less points into stun always feels nice. So having the stun be basically level 2 with a bonus, level 1 is nice. The CK nerf, I'm not sure if it's enough. I think losing that much damage on the stun helps, but I think the hero is still going to be like basically auto-picked in every game. Just because like he kind of got buffed by healing styles being nerfed because he self-sustains with Chaos Strike, no, regardless, safe lane or off lane or even mid. And you still just only put 1 point in Chaos Bolt and your W early, and you're very effective. I don't think the, like, what does this average out to a nerf of? From 90 to 180 to 60 to 120. I mean, yeah, that's I mean, at least that like damage nerf is okay, so maybe people will be able to get more to the lane in the first early levels. But I think he's still just way too strong at setting up for Grimstrokes and other type of heroes with him. Just because I think the stun, it feels bad when they roll high on the damage and roll low on the stun, but it feels worse when they roll low on the damage and higher on the stun the early game. So maybe they should have changed that aspect a bit more. But I don't know, we'll see. Like I said, he also got buffed by the healing salve change. Battery Salt affecting creeps is interesting. It'll help Clockwork scale a bit more. I think, you know, like, there's a lot of issues with this hero. His laning phase is kind of weak a lot of the time, unless he knows what he's against, so it's hard to pick him pubs a lot of the time. Unless, like, the meta is very defined. Like, if there's going to be, like, a Bane or something in your game every time, then it probably isn't so bad. Or if ranged offlaners are a lot more popular, ranged safe laners, then he gets a little stronger, depending on how strong the other support heroes are. And then having, you know, maybe this is enough to let him farm towards a Wraith Fact or something, so he can buy his own. But I'm not sure. I think people get, like, the Shard and the Ags quite often on Clockwork, and I'm not sure if that's, like, going to be worth having on your team a lot of the times. We'll see. This is a change I'm not too sure about without seeing more play. It doesn't like change him fundamentally at all in the lane. At least it just makes him probably a little easier to scale on and be able to pick up more scraps in the mid game. CM change. I think this is a big buff. Actually, losing 1 strength kind of sucks, but the 50 cast range can actually go quite a long while to catch people from smoke or fog. Like getting close to an Ember Spirit or a Void Spirit from certain angles with extra 50 cast range is actually a big deal. And then the slow increased, I believe that's at every level. That's like, the Q is obviously the best spell in the lane, so this is actually a very big buff. Darkseer, don't really care too much. I heard that this is bugged, but the 100 damage vacuum makes him much stronger in lane. I think the heroes that he'll typically like to play against, like the TBs, Medusas, and Lunas, they'll probably still get picked a bit at first, but if those kind of go out of favor for the more self-sustaining safe laners since Salves got buffed, or sorry, nerfed, then he probably won't be as useful anyway. Definitely benefits more from those slower type of games where the enemy carry wants to go jungle early. He can get his own farm versus like getting beat up by Monkey Kings and Ursas and stuff like that. That like, and also on top of that, like the illusions just aren't strong that he makes from those heroes. Dark Willow change is kind of whatever. Dawnbreaker has kind of whatever changes, but the cooldown buff on the ult is actually pretty impactful, I think, for later on in the game. Don't know if it's enough to make her super good. I think she was already okay. The Dazzle, Poison, Tough Shard, if this keeps getting buffed, this hero is going to be super OP, but I think he's still just not that good right now. I'm not sure. He might be better this patch. This is one of the heroes where it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden he just started getting picked a lot, but it also wouldn't surprise me too much either if it kind of stayed the same where he's under the radar. But I think Dazzle's definitely a little underrated right now. Big change for Disruptor, I think an extra second on the silence can matter a lot in certain situations. You're definitely your most impactful spell outside of Glimpse for catching. Dragon Knight definitely needed some nerfs. Don't think the shard duration matters. The AoE matters probably more than the duration. Because I think it still clears creep waves no matter what. And you're mostly killing people in Dragon Knight stun plus one more stun. Or like you're trying to like blink stun shard somebody in like the first 20 minutes of the game, and that's what you're playing off. Maybe you have a Hoodwink or a Skywrath on your team to follow up, and they should just get bursted for the most part out of your stun. But you know, these nerfs definitely add up over time. Like maybe in a couple patches from now, he'll have accumulated enough small nerfs that he's just not that strong anymore. Pretty big buff to Earthshaker. The Drow change is pretty meaningless, I think. Like it might like this is probably like a really strong level 25 talent, but I think the other talent might even be better. I haven't seen Drow that much, but like 25 talents, they're not like the timing you ever play for on certain heroes, so it doesn't really change the early game or anything of those heroes. Earthshaker, this is a pretty big buff. Having level 2 of a spell level 1 is always a really nice buff to any hero. Again, not sure how effective he is in the current patch. I've never felt good about having a Shaker on my team. And I think he's like 1 or 2 changes off being really, really good again. Same reason, same thing about like the opposite of Dragonite. Like 1 or 2 nerfs more for Dragonite, I'd be very like worried about picking him all the time. The way he's like picked pretty much automatically in my eyes early in drafts, and then Earthshaker's like the opposite here. Where, like 1 or 2 small changes positively in his direction will make him much stronger. And it's stuff like this that you like to see because he's not getting overtuned. They're really trying to find the sweet spot for his balance. Elder Titan, kind of whatever. I think the bonus speed per creep is interesting. This hero is also very strange to me. He feels super strong in some games and super weak in others. Like I see him as a hero with like a very high variance in his effectiveness in certain games. So this doesn't really solve his problems there, but these buffs definitely help him a lot in the lane, at least for the spirit, I'm imagining. And then the Earth Splitter cooldown is just kind of nice. Because 120 is probably too long early on. Ember nerfs slash buff. I don't think this matters too much. I think he's still in the same place he was last patch. I think Enigma's conversions should have been nerfed more. I think the magic resistance is like... the one thing they changed about Lycan Wolves and Enigma summons always in the past like 4 billion years is they'll go through periods like, okay, they have like 0 armor. Oh, now they have 0 magic resistance but a lot of armor. And like whatever like tinkering they do always results in them either being completely worthless in lane or way too strong. And right now, like, you just can't kill them with nukes in lane. Like, especially in the early levels, and he denies XP with the Eidolons too, so the early levels last even longer. He's just way too strong. I don't think this cooldown change matters at all. And it's really just because the magic resistance is so high that if you just like pick them against certain heroes, it's like an automatic win. But if like, especially in pubs, if it's blind pick, and the other team just picks like some useless melee hero early on, or even like maybe even a Luna or something, I don't know, something that just can't do anything to the Eidolons at all, like not a like Gyro probably does fine against them or something, then you're just gonna crush that lane. And if they do somehow have some spells that interact with the like for some reason they pick Pangolier carry, he's just gonna clear them with his Q since it's physical damage, and like it's just so toxic. Faceless Void, these don't matter. I'm not sure how much the time lock thing matters. I think it'd probably be the same as before, but maybe this matters for like perma-bashing people a little bit. But even then, like the duration is still longer than the second attack, so maybe the perma-bashes will be longer? I'm not sure. Like if you bash on top of a bash, I'm not sure what that really changes. It's something I'd probably have to get a feel for. Inkswell nerf is okay. I don't know how much it matters to lose 25 radius. It will affect some like closer chasing situations, and then the cooldown being nerfed a bit kind of helps because, especially at the like, it's like the shard that makes the hero so strong right now. The being able to heal and save people with it, the strongest spell. That didn't really get affected too much. It lost like 3-second cooldown. Huskar, this helps him in the lane a little bit. The level 1 Q getting a bit of a damage bump helps him secure creeps and fight in the early game, which is nice. Io, pretty big nerf. I think the hero was almost entirely based around this overcharge spell, with like people maxing tether and overcharge first, overcharge over tether. So this definitely affects the laning phase of the hero. Another thing where you have to really get a feel for how much it matters, because a lot of the time it's not just the attack speed buff, it's like the healing and blah blah blah. You just can't trade with the spell. So level 3 is definitely your strong point on Io, whereas before it felt super strong level 2, just because the 50 attack speed is actually a really big deal early. So yeah, pretty big nerf to the laning phase of the hero, at least. Huddle change, I was expecting more for this hero. I think the hero is extremely brain dead to play as and against. And it's kind of interesting because like it's kind of a new playstyle for the hero, at least recently, ever since 9 started doing it a lot. But it's very, very like uninteractive in the early game. It feels like you just both nuking the creeps and farming, and I don't know, it just seems kind of snooze. I wish this hero just got nerfed into oblivion and never saw it again. Legion Commander, not too much of a change here either. This doesn't really affect lanes he was strong or weakened at all, I don't think. The Lashrak change is pretty big. You'll always hit them with the lightning bounce if they're close enough. Since it has 5 bounces level 1, normally there's 4 creeps to soak. But normally you'd cast it on them if they were next to the creep you wanted to, or they'd be closer to the range creep. And losing 20 damage makes it much easier to deny against the Lashrak hero now, and his lanes are gonna suffer a lot because of that. It should be much easier to CS versus Lashrak, which affects him quite a bit. Frost Blast, that helps him a lot, but I don't even know what skill build liches are going these days. Another hero I think is very underrated, but maybe because his mana pool is so limited in the early game, and I don't know how much this really affects his early mana, like 10 mana on the second level. Lifestealer change, not really a big deal. He kind of really needs like more damage somehow. Every time I have a Lifestealer on my team, there's times where like they're kind of 1v9ing because they're invincible, but I feel like they just don't kill people as quickly. Like a lot of the way team fights are decided in Dota is whoever kills the other team's backline supports quicker this patch, because people are picking Grimstrokes, Rubiks, Banes, these very impactful ranged supports, Coddles even. And like Lifestealer can't get next to a Coddle unless someone else brings him there, and Coddle might just like force staff and run away since he's so fast. And if the other team has some like either like a Medusa or something that's just gonna outscale the Lifestealer anyway, or Juggernaut with a blink that just Omni slashes the supports or spins with a shard on the supports, they'll just like 5v3 you because they team wipe your supports really early, and it's just kind of like too slow of a hero in fights, in my opinion, which is his big problem. His lane is strong for the most part. It's hard to kill, but it kind of just doesn't matter. I don't think this really solves his problems. Fiery Soul, I think, could last a little longer. This happens all the time. I've actually had a lot of success on Lena, even after the nerfs to her passive, because the old passive was definitely better. And, like, you're pushing high ground, and the stacks don't last long enough between creep waves. And, like, you can't just stun the ground to get your stacks rolling. So it definitely feels bad, and I don't think that changes that aspect of it, and that'd be my only real complaint about the spell, other than trying to kill people out of Shadow Blade with no stacks, because if you only cast your spells on one guy, then you're only getting 3 stacks, but I don't really think it solves, like, the sieging problem she has. Lion Don't know how much these changes matter at all. Level and Hex cooldown is kind of cool, I guess, but not a big deal either. Lucent Beam damage is interesting. I don't think this will make people put more points into it early, so I'm not sure how it matters at all. It really only buffs support Luna in some way with like an Aghanim's build. Especially, I guess, like, if you want to call it a timing for 25 with Ag's Refresher, you're not really getting there as like a forward Luna very often, so it's not like a big change to make you want to pick it. Like in Shapeshift, crit damage is interesting because I think like one of the main benefits of this hero is the Aghanims. So that kind of buffs the Aghanims in a way. The crit itself isn't like too important for your main hero. Skewer. The slow, I don't think this ever matters. Like, I guess the slow is like a decent amount, but kind of just playing around RP and pulling people out of position more often than anything. Shockwave Erupt. I'm guessing this is like the Aghanims or something? Erupt, armor reduction. Yeah, it must have still be Scepter stuff. I don't think the Scepter is very good. Wouldn't worry about it. Marcy. This was definitely a good change. The hero definitely suffered from her ulti having a long cooldown. That's kind of her main spell for killing people, other than tossing people so that other people can deal the damage. And I didn't know about this one frame before being stunned thing, so this is a clear buff as well. Mars, another nerf. He's probably still going to get picked as the most like stable offlaner every game, every patch, just because he's kind of like old Darkseer, where like I don't think there's any lane matchup he cares too much about. Even in the bad ones, he's still useful with his spells. He has a stun, he has team fights, he's strong in lane, he sets up for other heroes. They'd have to nerf his numbers a lot for people to stop picking him. Mana cost. Don't care so much about Nightstalker. Hero's probably the same as before. Hammer of Purity, interesting change. I don't think that matters at all. The Shield Crash nerf might affect Pango in the early laning stages, but I think you're only casting it once per creep wave anyway, so not really a big difference. Roll Up is definitely in need of nerfs. It's probably like one of the strongest reasons. Like if you used to play Pango versus Puck without Roll Up, you would get coiled and you can't roll. And then all of a sudden you just use this roll up spell and then you roll and you're out of coil. It gives them like way too much like play against those kind of pseudo counters. Like even Ember Root, like, just roll up, get out of it. And the dispel aspect is probably the strongest part of it. So I wouldn't say it like it's gonna matter in some situations, but doesn't really affect the hero's pick or usefulness. Like his rate of being picked is gonna be picked a lot. This change is kind of big. It's the spell you max second, so probably not a big deal, but PL's like weakest aspect of the game is when he's trying to get to like all 4 spells being maxed. So like, or I guess all 3. Like his weakest, like even if you get like level 10 diffusal, you have 1 in your Q, 4 in your W, 4 in your E. You're not like super strong yet, and that's like when you're weakest. And like getting to like level 12, 13 is when you're probably not too weak to fight. Getting your second or third item is always important, and like he'll get slowed down the most before his doppelganger max from my perspective. People use it to get to camps faster. It can be on cooldown when you get ganked. Stuff like that will definitely help him a little bit, but still think the hero's not too strong. Pudge buffs are interesting. I don't know what they'd have to... His Flesh Heap is actually a lot more useful than you think because it blocks the damage from his Rot, but I'm not sure what they could change about Pudge to make him useful. I think he's still too weak in lane. I think Nether Ward nerfs is like super, super good. Pugna's really boring to play against as well. And the damage reduction as Nether Ward is probably still too high. I think 15% or 16% at max level would have been like ideal for me. You just like have to get a BKB first against this hero to do any damage on a lot of heroes. Like if you're Ember or Void Spirit, like if you don't have BKB, even Storm, you just don't deal any damage, and the ward is just like owning you the whole time. Don't think it's really gonna stop Pugna from being picked every game either. Ricky nerfs, or sorry, not nerfs, buffs don't matter. This buff doesn't matter on Shadow Poison. This buff doesn't matter on Shadow Fiend. Weird nerf to Strength Growth. Nice buff to the mana cost and Curse, but honestly not a big deal. I think the Null Talisman, like this hero's already not picked, but Null Talismans also felt really nice, and those got nerfed, so he's really not gonna, like, overall nerf no matter what the rest of this says, just because the Null Talismans were so nice in the early game for any type of Silencer build. Unless you were 5, of course, and I don't think these changes matter at all for 5. Anything, it's worse since you have less strength gain. These Slark changes probably don't matter at all, but they are nice in the lane, I guess. I just don't think people are going to be picking Slark that much. I think getting to level 6 is very difficult without people salving you, so probably not going to see them unless it's like the perfect last pick game for it, and in those type of games, when you're last picking, there's usually always something better to last pick than Slark. Like, oh, we want to win the lane, there's probably Ursa or Monkey King or something else still in the pool that also bullies people with, you know, melee auto attack passive, so it's not a strong hero. Assassinate change doesn't matter at all. This Sven attack speed thing might be cool. I think the hero's already underrated. The Shard is really, really strong. Maybe even pickable as like a utility. Might see him more like as a utility offlane if Wraith Pact gets nerfed, because then he can build other stuff to help the team. I don't know how much effectiveness a Wraith Pact Sven would have, and he'd have to get like Blink and BKB first. So it's just kind of awkward, and there's other heroes that just do that better, like Mars, but the Shard is definitely very underrated on Sven. If he ever gets picked at all, it's going to be because of that. Techies changes. I haven't played this hero since the rework, so I can't tell you too much other than these are buffs, and the hero was already borderline pickable, so maybe he'll get picked more. TB getting a stronger meta level 1 is a big deal. Trying to snowball off denies in the early levels can really like help him in the early laning phase. But I think like I would say he's still overall nerfed, not being able to get salved as much. Like I think it's actually that big of a deal because he has high armor and gets a lot out of the HP from salves, and he'll get low on HP pretty easily. Like sure, you can still get tangos, but he suffers against those burst lanes that he wants to stay full HP the whole time. If they do go on him, he'll like live with very little HP, and he'll need to get salved. And I don't think the meta change is really gonna help him that much. It might get him towards level 4 or 5 where he can jungle early, just because they'll stay ahead in the early lane, but I don't know. It definitely feels like the hero's gonna be much weaker in lane regardless of this change. Timbersaw, I don't know what these changes really mean. I think the hero is still very strong. Looks like a buff of 1 strength to me, and then this cast range thing doesn't matter at all. Unless, like, for some reason, the trees in the side lanes are 50 range short in some angles to CS with. I don't know. I just don't really see it. Who cares about Tinker? This hero sucks. Tusk. Buffed for some reason. I think the hero is already good. Ursa buff is also a little strange to me. I think the hero is already good. Might be too good with this Earthshock change. Venge buff is kind of cool. Visage probably deserved more nerfs. These aren't enough. No one really cares about Warlock right now, but maybe he'll be more pickable with salves being out of the question. Like, maybe that's how you solve picking those greedier carries, is like you just heal them with Warlock. The problem with that type of approach has always been that when you have a Warlock, you have like 0 kill potential in lane for the most part, unless the other team is messing up. You give their offlaner such a huge start that he can like decide the tempo of the game usually off of it. Like you'll just give their axe or their Timbersaw first 2 items for free. There's just no gank potential with a Warlock either, for the most part. And Gemini attack, interesting change. I don't know if people are going to play him as 4 some more because of this, but I don't even remember the nerfs to him that made people stop picking him as much, but maybe it'll get picked. I'm not sure. I'm not a Weaver expert. Wind Ranger, I think, is the same as before. Only Seb God was good at it, so I don't think anyone else can really comment on how strong the hero is. It seems underwhelming a lot of the time, but they won the major with it, so what am I to say? Witch Doctor Death Ward cooldown's a big deal. I think if I think Witch Doctor would be like the best 5 in the game if the cooldown on his Death Ward was like 45 seconds even. So like getting down to 60 is getting very close. Just being able to like kill people every time this Death Ward is up with a smoke or something in the early game. Like between like second daytime, like 10 minutes to 15 minutes, you can get a lot of kills just because of the vision you get from day, and you can use your smokes then. People have their ults and supports. The mid and the off lane are usually strong at then. Off lane's finishing blink around then. And like the more kills you can get between those 5 minutes, the better. So like the lower cooldowns you have on your support ultimates, for instance, the easier it is to get more kills and set up. It's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of having Lion on my team versus like a Hoodwink or Skywrath even, because they can just play around those like Ember or Void Spirit mids or Mars offlane so much easier by combining their spells together instead of waiting for long cooldowns. But yeah, that's a big change. I think this hero will definitely get picked a lot more. And then Zeus was already starting to get picked. He was very underrated. At least people have told me that he's like very strong, maybe not broken, but maybe broken. Like people aren't very sure, but I haven't really seen it lose much as 4, honestly, from my perspective. But yeah, that wraps up the patch. I was expecting a bigger patch. I think not the DPC, the Dota Plus changes were very big, and I enjoy them a lot. The Voidless expansion, the battle report seems really cool. There's like new sets and stuff. But I think these changes, like the biggest changes, are these two: the Null Talisman, the Healing Salve. I think that'll have the most profound impact on the early game, at least on a lot of heroes, and we'll see how that works out. Another nerf for like int mids, I think, if anything, and then for carries. So again, offlane's gonna feel really strong, and probably 4s and 5s are gonna feel stronger because they'll be buying less healing salves ideally, but I don't know, maybe it'll be even worse for the supports. Maybe the carries will just double down and be like, no, now you buy me 2 salves every time, or I feed. Thank you. But yeah, that about concludes the video. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. Or day, wherever you're from. Peace.